Next, we're going to look at convergent margins. Now, when two plates are moving towards each other, something has to give. Try it. Stick your fingers out and push them together. Either they'll push each other up, or one hand will slide underneath the other. What happens when two plates converge depends on the kind of rock involved, and we're going to look at three examples. The first one is when a continental plate and an ocean plate are converging. Now, in this case, the oceanic crust, of course, is thinner and more dense, and so it sinks underneath the continental crust. As it does this, two important things happen. First of all, where the oceanic crust and the continental crust meet, a long trench forms, and this trench is parallel to the boundary, and it's a rather deep part of the ocean floor. And the second thing is, as that oceanic crust gets deeper towards the mantle, it warms up and it begins to melt. And that melting causes a chain of volcanoes to form on the continent parallel to the plate boundary. This sinking is called subduction, and this chain of volcanoes, well, here's an example, the Andes. Another example would be the Cascades in the northwest U.S. These volcanic arc mountains have a few interesting characteristics. First of all, they're continental volcanoes. They have a relatively silicon-rich lava, a rock type called either andesite or rhyolite commonly, and that lava doesn't flow very well. So these volcanic mountains are often rounded and symmetrical in shape, the lava tending to pile up rather high. They also can be relatively explosive volcanically. This is Mount St. Helens erupting in 1980, part of the Cascade chain. A chain of volcanoes forms in this situation at a pretty constant distance from the subduction zone, so parallel to the continental boundary and a certain distance from the plate boundary. A second possibility is that both of the plates will be oceanic plates. In that case, again, one of them will subduct underneath the other, and again it will form a chain of volcanoes and a trench, but the difference here is both of these things are in the ocean. So the trench becomes very commonly the deepest part of the ocean, certainly in that vicinity. The deepest part of the ocean anywhere is in fact a trench. And the volcanoes form islands and are sometimes called island arc volcanoes. The Philippines is an example of an island arc volcanic chain of islands formed by subduction of one oceanic plate underneath another. Here is the Mariana Trench. It is the deepest point in the ocean, 6.85 miles below sea level. That is a really deep trench. And you can see the chain of islands above it, and parallel to it, the island of Guam is part of the Mariana Islands near the Mariana Trench. Island chains of this type are called island arc volcanoes. And remember that both of these plates involved are basalt rock. They're relatively low in silicon, and so the volcanoes that they form also form a composition that is relatively low in silicon, basaltic volcanoes. These volcanoes tend to be a little less dangerous because the lava flows relatively easily. Of course, you wouldn't want to be in the path of it, but you could very commonly get out of the way of a basaltic volcanic flow. Now, the other possibility, of course, is that both plates are continental plates. And in that case, the continental plates are both too buoyant and too thick to subduct. And so the only place to go after that is up. So here's an example of continent-continent convergence. Now, what you see in this picture is the leading edge of ancient oceanic crust has been completely subducted, and following behind it, a continent came along, but the continent can't be subducted, and so it pushes against the other continent and forms a very tall, rugged mountain range, such as the Himalayas. These continental chains of mountains have some very interesting characteristics. They're made up of rocks that are folded and faulted. You can very commonly see layers that are tilted or folded in them. They're made up of sedimentary or metamorphic rocks. Sometimes there's a little volcanic rock mixed in, but mostly not. They can be very rugged when they're young, and they become more rounded with age due to erosion. Some examples of continental mountain chains that formed from two continents coming together are the Rockies, the Appalachians, the Himalayas. The Appalachians, of course, don't look anything like the Rockies. They're much more rounded and shorter, and that is because they are a very ancient continental mountain chain, and they've been eroding for a very long time.